Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode number 107 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's episode, I want to share with you some signs and symptoms of a staph infection on the skin. Now, I'm going to preface this conversation with the fact that I am not a doctor nor a medical practitioner. However, I did go online and do a little bit of research. I do hope to have a doctor come on here and talk more in depth about this. But for now, this may at least help give you some clues as to when you need to really go seek help instead of trying a bunch of different natural remedies. Because when you have a staph infection on your skin, it's important to seek that medical attention instead of just going on to, say, Facebook and asking strangers for help when really you need the help of your doctor. Before just handing you a list of symptoms, I want to tell you a story. I want to share the story of one of my clients. We'll call her Sarah for this example. That's not her real name, but it'll work for this. We had just started working together, and this is often what happens when I have clients that have eczema and they're dealing with flares, pretty intense flares at that. And we were in this sort of fact-finding phase, so we hadn't dug too far in, and in the process, she developed a very severe flare of eczema. She was trying all the creams and different things that she had on hand and really didn't want to go back and see her doctor, and finally admitted to me that she was experiencing incredible redness, this really intense, horrible itch, and the rash itself was burning. And so she was having such difficulty sleeping at night and thus was just feeling awful because day after day after day, she wasn't getting sleep, wasn't feeling rested, and these symptoms were driving her nuts. And she's literally at the point of like, what can I do? I really need help. I've tried everything I can on my own. Now, here's the thing. It's tricky to wait until your flare gets to this point where you're like, hey, can I do a bunch of natural options maybe to help? And then expecting those natural options to quickly alleviate such tremendous, intense symptoms. That's not usually realistic. So I just think it's important that we manage expectations always. So if you're thinking of ever getting help, it's better to reach out when you're not in the midst of like the worst flare ever. It's not to deter you or detract from that desire of wanting to seek help, but just understand that natural things and alternative options do take time. And if you are looking for help immediately, that's where getting help from your doctor and even some, I know you might cringe at this for some of us, but conventional medicine can be helpful in that respect. And that's why I think that there's such tremendous power when we can blend both together and take that step back from fearing everything. Because I understand at times you feel frustrated because you haven't been heard and you just want to look in other directions. And so sometimes we feel like it's the better option to turn our back on conventional routes. But I would caution you against that. I would say that there's a time and a place for all of it. And so in this particular instance, I suggested that Sarah go back to her dermatologist to check for staph and request a culture to be done. Her dermatologist didn't actually think it was staph, but Sarah fortunately advocated for herself and really pushed to have a culture done. And finally, the dermatologist agreed. It came back positive for staph. So she did actually have a staph infection and was started on antibiotics and began feeling a heck of a lot better, was able to sleep, starting to feel at least those intense symptoms that were really wrecking her life at that moment calm down. Unfortunately, this story is not unique. It's a pretty common occurrence where a client will feel like they want to do everything natural, but in actuality, what's driving the issue is staph. So that's why I started to wonder whether people even knew what the symptoms of a staph infection could potentially be. Sarah's response to my suggestion of getting a culture and whatnot was really like, I didn't even think of that. She didn't even consider it, to be honest. And I ran a poll on my Instagram following, and 98% of my viewers wanted to know more about the signs of a possible staph infection. That's why I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to just share some tidbits to help you, right? That's the whole point, is to help you know when you really need to go back to the doctor and ask for help instead of trying to manage everything yourself, because staph can be no joke. You don't mess with staph. You need to see a doctor. I did a bunch of digging and put together a list that I'm going to share with you. That said, I want to reiterate, I'm not a doctor, and this list is not intended to diagnose you. Instead, it's meant to educate you as warning signs of when to go seek medical attention rather than just trying remedy after remedy. And of course, we cannot forget that MRSA, which is the antibiotic-resistant version, is also a possible option here. So again, let's not mess with staph, especially if you've got wounds or cuts in the skin that could potentially allow that staph access to your bloodstream. Here is a list of symptoms that would signal to you that you really should go seek help and have a doctor check this out and potentially consider asking for that culture. Pus that's coming from the rash, if you see any oozing or weeping, especially if the liquid is like whitish or yellowish in color, there are boils, abscesses, or little blisters, redness, swelling, tenderness, or painfulness. If there's a wrinkling or peeling skin that also burns, and burning is another big red flag. And then, of course, crazy intense itching. And this itching may actually impede your ability to sleep and just feel like a sane person. So if you feel like you're experiencing a number of these, I would say number one, it's important to get clear on your symptoms. Then call your doctor and get in ASAP. If you can't see your dermatologist right away, call your family doctor. Get seen by a physician. Request a culture of the rash, especially if you're using topical steroids and they have not been working. Because in this particular case, antibiotics are what is necessary. Topical steroids will not work. One final point that I think is very important to be made here. This does not just happen to someone with eczema. Staph aureus infections can happen to anyone. And that means that it's not an eczema-specific issue. We oftentimes worry about staph infections when it comes to eczema, but I've also worked with psoriasis clients who've had staph infections as well. One of the hallmarks of eczema is this skin microbiome dysbiosis with an increase in Staph aureus on the skin. But again, it's not necessarily specific to eczema. So if you have these symptoms and you're dealing with some other type of skin diagnosis, go to your doctor. If you've had a staph infection in the past, I would love to hear your experience with that. What were your symptoms? What were your issues that you were dealing with? And how did you finally get diagnosed with a staph infection? Head on over to skinterrupt.com/107 in order to leave your comments on this particular episode so we can keep the conversation going. And of course, you can leave questions there as well. And don't forget, head on over to your podcast platform of choice, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. That way, the next episode will land on your mobile device without you having to do a thing. And last but not least, you guys know I'm all about sharing. I think it's imperative that we share this information with our community, because if 98% of my Instagram community had no idea what clear symptoms of staph infections were, there's a very good chance that a lot of people in our community at large do not know either. It is important that we help educate each other. That way, we can ultimately get on the road sooner rather than later to rebuilding healthier skin. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.